What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And the New York Giants defense played great on Monday Night Football, held the Green Bay Packers in check, slowed down Jordan Love. Of course, they were coming off of a red-hot performance against the Kansas City Chiefs. They were the favorites entering this matchup with the Giants, but alas, Tibido and the Giants got the better of Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers. And the New York Giants are now on a 3-game winning streak, and a lot of that is thanks to the play of their defense. The Giants defense has been stellar for the majority of the season. Have they had their hiccups? Absolutely they have. But for the majority of the year, Wink Martindale has done a fine job keeping this defense near the top of the league and really holding opposing offenses in check. And we saw that on Monday night against the Packers. And in particular, we saw two young players really stand out in this game, and they've been standing out really all season long. And those two players that we want to talk about are Kayvon Tibido, edge rusher, Oregon, 5th overall pick in last year's draft, who now has 12 sacks on the season, and of course, first round pick in this year's draft, cornerback Deonte Banks out of Maryland. Love the way that Banks has been playing. He had that key pass breakup at the end, did surrender a touchdown as well at the end, but that was more of a product of a really damn good throw and a catch. Kind of a fluky play if you ask me. Banks had pretty good coverage on that play, and really, for the majority of the plays in the game, led the team in tackles, had a stellar performance on Monday night, and has been proven to be a really good player for the New York Giants all throughout this rookie season. So we're going to go ahead and talk about these two standout New York Giants defenders, how good they've been, how good we think they're going to be since they are young players, and really how good the Giants defense has been in totality. Before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode, subscribe to the channel if you are new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And first, I want to ask you how you're feeling about Kayvon Tibido putting those bust narratives to rest and really just showing up and showing out in his second season.
Well, my friend, I'm doing pretty well. And look, the Giants have been waiting for a long time for a young pass rusher to take hold. We've been waiting since like JPP to really have that guy who just wrecks a game, makes an impact, shows up when it matters most. Kayvon Tibido has done that and then some this season. And, first couple of weeks was getting his feet under him, obviously going into his second season. Wink Martindale's system is definitely not favorable for pass rushers. And guys, Kayvon Tibido is the first player in the history of Wink Martindale's defense to ever record 10 sacks, or double-digit sacks coming off of the edge as an outside linebacker. Guys, I mean, think about just how ridiculous that is. Wink Martindale is regarded as one of the best defensive coordinators in football, over the last decade. And he's never had a guy have over 10 sacks until this season. That should showcase Kayvon Tibido just how well he is playing in this system. And from what it's worth, I do think they tweaked how they were using him. You kind of hinted at this a couple weeks ago. They were using him very oddly, and they were dropping him into coverage. They were doing some weird things with him, and they kind of took all that away, and they started really using him as a pure pass rusher every down, get after the quarterback, do what you have to do. I think they started to kind of tweak the defense to favor some of these strengths and not try to fit square pegs into round holes like we've heard many a time over the past couple years with the Giants. Kayvon Tibido has eliminated and, kind of busted that bust narrative. And I do think that right now, Kayvon Tibido is in line to be a really great player for this Giants team for a long time. And there's a couple things that I like about what we've seen from him this year. How many times do we talk about players failing to handle the New York media? How many times are we talking about players that have gotten ran out of town by the New York media? If you're a sports fan of multiple New York teams, we saw it happen to Joey Gallo. A lot of people say it happened to OBJ. A lot of people say it happens to tons of players across this market. And what I love about Kayvon Tibido is that he took that kind of negative energy, coming from a lot of different talk show hosts and people that have prominent voices in this space, and said, you know what? I'm not going to answer that with my words. I'm going to answer that with my actions. And I think that's what makes a great player in New York. That's what made Eli so great. The fact that he never cared about what anybody said about him. He didn't have social media. He never responded. He went out there and won 2 Super Bowls. That's how he shut everybody up. And now he's regarded as one of the best players in the history of sports in New York in general. And now you look at Kayvon Tibido, he has the opportunity, and I think he has some great mentors. Specifically, Michael Strahan's been a really, really good voice for him. He's obviously had a good connection with Justin Tuck. I do think that right now we're seeing Kayvon Tibido handle the media in a really great way, and that was his main red flag coming out of the draft, if you guys don't recall, that he was a little bit emotional, didn't care. He was lackadaisical. He took plays off. Those are all quelled. He has quelled all of those narratives. And I think that right now what I've loved the most about him is his mental capabilities, because we know that he is physically capable. We know that he is a physical specimen. We know he's fast. We know he's strong. We know he's agile. We know he can do it all on the football field from a physical standpoint. But a lot of times you wonder, like, can he handle the mental aspect of being a Giant, being a New York sports player? And I think he's done that with flying colors. He took really tough criticism. I mean, to this year, beginning of this year, when he was not doing much, he took some of the most criticism I've seen from somebody in this market, in this space, in a while. And he looked it in the face and said, all right, I know what I'm going to do here. And I really appreciate the fact that guys like Carl Banks went out there and, like, really stood up for him and did the talking for Kayvon. He stood up for Kayvon and went on the talk show host and spoke on his behalf and defended him. So Kayvon didn't have to do it. I think a lot of people, may disregard how important that was, that Carl Banks did that for him, because it really took Kayvon away out of that equation. It took him out of that equation in a way that he didn't have to go and defend himself. All he had to do was play football, and he let the guys that he trusted, take that narrative for him. So I do really think that this was a really good situation when a mentor stood up and defended a disciple and defended, this young player that really could become something. And I thought that was a really special moment in this season. And since then, Kayvon Tibido has been one of our best players. And this year, guys, he has 13 sacks, according to PFF. Some other, places will have a little bit less. But according to PFF, he has 37 pressures, 13 sacks. I mean, when's the last time we've had a pass rusher get 13 sacks? I can't recall. This is a player that's really, really dominating. And, his run blocking grades, or rather his run defense grades, have been really, really solid over the last couple weeks. Pass rush grades have been really, really solid. He could clean up his tackling a little bit. Has missed 16.2% of his tackles, but hasn't missed a tackle in the last 2 weeks, only 2 in the last 5 weeks. So he's gotten a lot better in that regard. I do believe that this is a player that is blossoming before our eyes. And as a sophomore, going into his third season, we have the 5th-year option 2 down the road. This is a guy we've got locked in, and he's only getting better at 22 years old. People called him a bust, guys. He's 22 years old. I think the Evan Neal situation is a little bit different personally. And, I think that really he's been injured and he hasn't been good. We haven't seen those flashes. Kayvon Tibido has been healthy this year, knock on wood. He's shown those flashes, and he's answered the call to the medium criticism. He hasn't called people sheep. He hasn't called himself a lion. He hasn't taken to the media to express his opinion. He's just done it on the football field, and I think that's something that we really should congratulate. We really should, give him a standing ovation for that, because a lot of players fail to answer the call.
Yeah, and I think that Kayvon Tibido has done a great job answering the call, as you mentioned. I pulled up some stats to kind of corroborate your point on the coverage aspect of his game. If you take a look at his coverage snaps week by week, the past 2 weeks he's played 2 in total, both of them coming against Green Bay. Against the Patriots, he had 0 coverage snaps. So you're definitely right. Against Washington in week 11, he did have 9 coverage snaps, which is the most that he's had since week 7 against Washington. So I guess what we're seeing there is there's actually a pattern based on who they're playing. They're playing the defense differently, which is, of course, scheming for your opponent. But it's also correlated that you look at the 9 coverage snaps, and if you're going by PFF's grading scale, he had his lowest PFF grade in that game with the 9 coverage snaps, and he had a higher PFF grade in both of the other 2 games where he had 2 combined coverage snaps across 2 games. So there's definitely correlation there. I agree with what you were saying. Wink Martindale did adjust the defense. We know that because early in the season, a lot of man coverage, a lot of Kayvon dropping back into coverage, and a lot of struggles from the defense early on this season. They switched to a more zone-heavy approach. A lot of blitzing, letting Kayvon Tibido do more one-on-one pass rushing, and he's been playing a lot better for it, and so has the defense in totality, like I said. So I think that what we're seeing here is Kayvon Tibido, as you mentioned, a young 22-year-old player, a lot of talent, a lot of upside, and I think he's only scratching the surface. This is a player that, comes out of college, at one point was considered a potential first overall selection, falls to number 5, right into the Giants' lap. They really needed a pass rusher, and they got one. They got a good one, too, because Kayvon Tibido, as you mentioned, comparing him to Jason Pierre-Paul, if you want to take that route, the last time the Giants had a player of this caliber was JPP, and with JPP, he had those 16-sack season. This 12 from Kayvon Tibido is the most since that 16-sack season that JPP had. I think that was all the way back in 2012. So if you're talking about potential, you're saying, okay, how good can Kayvon Tibido be? That Jason Pierre-Paul range, definitely a possibility for Kayvon Tibido if he continues at this pace and continues to improve year to year. And honestly, I think he's got the potential to be even better than JPP ever was, because Thibodeaux has some really rare traits. I like what you said about him kind of off the field and the way that he handles himself and handles himself in the media. He's got what it takes, and he's just got that right mental makeup and mentality to handle this New York media, how volatile it can be, and handle the wins and the losses and take them on the chin and just keep them moving. And I think that's something that really impresses me about Kayvon Tibido, being a young player with a lot of maturity and a lot of passion as well. It's not like he's just there stiff as a board. He's still a passionate player. You see him on the sidelines talking with his teammates, getting them hyped. You see him after games. I mean, we all remember last season against the Baltimore Ravens, gets his first sack of the season. It's a game-winning strip sack on Lamar Jackson. He takes a video on the social media team. He's crying. He's happy. It's awesome stuff. I like seeing players that passionate, and Thibodeaux brings that passion week in and week out, and he's been making plays. Maybe it's not always resulting in sacks. In recent weeks, it has been. He has 4 sacks in the last 3 games, but at the very least, he's pressuring the quarterback. He's converting his pass rushing snaps into pressures, and that's what's really, really important. He's just constantly being disruptive. And another underrated aspect of Kayvon Thibodeaux's game, in my opinion, I think he's a pretty damn good run defender. Maybe he could show a little bit more room for improvement there, or he has some room for improvement. Maybe he could be a little bit better, but I think he's pretty good. I think he is a good run defender, and also a blossoming pass rusher who has the potential to be an elite pass rusher over the next few seasons and hopefully throughout the entirety of his career with the New York Giants. So I love Kayvon Tibido. I love what he's bringing to this team, and he's really bringing that juice to this New York Giants defense and bringing in that pass rush that has been sorely missed for a long, long time, really since Jason Pierre-Paul. The only player that I can think of in between Jason Pierre-Paul and Kayvon Tibido is Olivier Vernon, but Olivier Vernon would get a lot of pressures, rarely converted them to sacks. This is a pass rusher who gets to the quarterback and finishes the play, and I think there's a lot of value to be had in converting those pressures into sacks, and that's why Kayvon Thibodeaux's second season has been so special. But how about a special first season from Deonte Banks? Let's talk about him. Led the team in tackles on Monday night with 12 total tackles, was targeted 10 times in coverage against the Packers, and only surrendered 5 receptions for 40 yards. That is impressive, my friends, because Green Bay, they've got a pretty good offense. They've got a good quarterback. Well, he's been playing well in recent weeks at the very least. They've got a lot of playmakers. I know Christian Watson was out, but they still have Jaden Reed, Dontayvius Wicks. They've got some good playmakers out there. And Deonte Banks didn't care who was lined up across from him. He was making plays all night long. He was holding receivers in check. Again, he was targeted 10 times in coverage and only surrendered 5 receptions. That is incredibly difficult to do, especially for a rookie cornerback playing in an aggressive Wink Martindale defense, a lot of the times playing on an island by himself. And Deonte Banks had that kind of production against the Packers. We've seen other young cornerbacks for the New York Giants really struggle early in their career, especially when asked to do too much and be that CB1. But Deonte Banks is thriving in this role. He loves it. Like, you watch the way he plays, he's being asked to be a CB1. Was that the expectation going into the season? No. We thought that our number 1 cornerback would be Adarius Jackson, and we thought that Deonte Banks would be the secondary cornerback and would just kind of have time to grow and develop into that CB1 role. Instead, he was thrust right into the starting role. He's the number 1 cornerback, and he has answered the call, and he does it with a lot of juice, a lot of energy, and an abundance of confidence. I love the confidence that Deonte Banks plays with. He never seems to get bothered by a play that he lets up. He's got very short-term memory, and that's what you really need to be a good cornerback in the NFL. You can't let those bad plays get to you. He makes a bad play or he lets up a reception, whatever. It's out of his mind as soon as the next play begins, and he's already moving on to the next play after that. So I love the way that Deonte Banks plays. His confidence is just paramount, and it's what's really helping him succeed, in my opinion. And I think that he had a stellar performance on Monday night. But Alex, what are you seeing from Deonte Banks that's got you so excited about this rookie?
I mean, I just love how confident he is. Like we need guys that have that level of confidence that, talk smack, get in the player's face, get receivers frustrated, and then make plays. We saw that, obviously, the touchdown you referenced was just a great throw and a great catch and really just a great play altogether by the Packers at the end of the game there. Not many guys are stopping that. But you know who's not really stopping some of those plays? You remember that Deonte Banks, that deep throw, and he just catches up. That you're seeing that 4-3 speed, catches up, and then gets his hand in the way and bats the ball down. That's a game-changing moment right there. That's a momentum changer because the Packers didn't have much time after that touchdown at the end. but that would have changed the course of the game. And you don't see that type of makeup speed very often from corners. I mean, his stuff is actually elite in that regard. I mean, keep in mind, guys, he was the top athletic rated cornerback in this most recent draft class, and he was in the top 10 in the last decade. So, you look actually at how great this player is in terms from an athletic standpoint. Deonte Banks is getting the reps right now to be our CB1 of the future, and we have 4 years of cost control play from him. Like, that is exactly what you want from a guy that's 22 years old. Obviously, like I said, elite athletic profile, and he's had some tremendous games this season. He has. I mean, he's given up a couple of big games. I remember Devonte Adams, obviously Garrett Wilson. Those two guys are all pros, by the way. You see what he did, and then he obviously got 87 yards a lot. I think he had one big catch against, maybe it was CeeDee Lamb or Michael Gallup or one of those guys. But really, he struggled against two guys, and it's Devonte Adams, and obviously, I think he gave up one big catch against Terry McLaurin in Week 7 as well, and then Garrett Wilson. So, are we really going to fault him from struggling as a rookie against two all-pro receivers? No, obviously not. He has dominated mostly the rest of the league that he's played up against, and those experiences against Garrett, those experiences against Devonte Adams, and the struggles he had against them is what's going to make him better long term. You need him to struggle against those guys. You need him to see that next level of quality, because he's now going to know, okay, like, I got to elevate my game against these guys. I got to get better. I have to be the best version of myself week in and week out to be a lockdown cornerback. And what I love the most about him, as I said at the beginning of this little rant here, is that he is just bleeding with confidence. He is just oozing with it, man. That confidence goes a long way for defensive backs. You need to have that confidence. One of my biggest concerns about him actually was his tackling, because he's kind of a smaller guy, 205 pounds. He's a little bit lanky, a little bit smaller, but he's had really good tackling grades this year. I mean, 11% missed tackle rate isn't anything to write home about, obviously, but end of the day, he hasn't really been that bad. You see a lot of cornerbacks with much higher rates than that. So, he's been pretty solid tackling, has been pretty adequate as a run defender, and he needs to be. That's Wink Martindale's scheme relies heavily on the cornerbacks to lock down the edge, and he's been more than fine in that regard. And what's even more impressive? He's been healthy. Knock on wood, obviously, again here, putting a lot of things out into the universe I don't want to come true. But he's been very, very healthy, and I think that also, like we're seeing right now with Evan Neal, for example, the fact that he's been injured so much, even Azeez Ojulari, the fact that these guys have been injured so much, it's really disrupted their growth and momentum and development. That is a detrimental part of their kind of process. And Banks being healthy, Banks being available and playing, and really getting the most of these opportunities and seeing what struggling looks like, seeing what adversity he has to face and has to challenge himself to overcome. That's what's going to make him get better. Being injured oftentimes ruins the development of a player early on. He's been healthy. He's been great. For a lot of these games, he's had a couple of down games, but otherwise, I've been really, really impressed. He's our CB1 of the future. Adarius Jackson, by the way, has locked it down alongside him at CB2. Is there a path here where you think that the Giants bring back Adarius Jackson on a much cheaper contract? Because I don't know. I don't think most teams would look at Adarius as a CB1 anymore. Maybe they would. Maybe I'm wrong. It's possible they do. But I wonder what a contract for him would look like comparably. This upcoming cornerback market is really deep. There's a lot of free agents available. But Adoree knows the scheme. He's a good player for us. Is there a realm where we bring him back on a much more affordable deal?
I could see it happening. Listen, he's played well for the Giants this season. I wouldn't say he's played well, okay? So he's not what he used to be, right? Like last season, you looked at him playing for the New York Giants as at CB1. You look back on those games versus Justin Jefferson and the Minnesota Vikings, and you say, okay, there were times last season where this guy was literally playing at an elite level, like top 3 cornerback level in certain matchups. You haven't seen that from him this year. He hasn't flashed anything similar to that at any point this season. So he's not the player he used to be. He's getting paid like the player that he used to be. So no, in 2024, he's not going to get a contract anywhere close to the one that he was just playing on. But for a significant discount to play a much, much less significant role, I could see it happening because, yeah, there might be a market out there for Adoree Jackson. There's going to be teams that want some veteran experience in their secondary, but the Giants still need to be one of those teams. Yeah, they're getting younger on the defensive side of the ball. They do have a young player in Deonte Banks that they can rely on as their CB1, but at CB2, it's still wide open. Are you relying on Trey Hawkins going into 2024 to start 17 games for you? No, you're not. You hope that he develops and one day can be that long full-time starter, but you do need some veteran experience. You need some reliability out there. Now, is Adoree Jackson as reliable as he used to be? Is he as good as he used to be? No, but on an affordable contract, it's a guy who knows the scheme, the system, the culture in the locker room, was a big leader in the locker room during a playoff run. I think this is a player that you would like to keep around at the right price tag. Again, veteran cornerbacks, there's going to be a need for them across the NFL, so there might be a lot of interest in Adoree Jackson, and there might be a little bit of a bidding war. If that's the case, I don't think that the Giants get involved. I think they let him walk and they go in a new direction. But veteran cornerback should be a need for the Giants. When you look at positions of need for teams, it's often just listed like cornerback. It's not cornerback that the Giants need. It's a veteran cornerback. They've got a lot of young pieces. They have some young players that are developing in that position. They need somebody with experience that can step in and really handle the pitfalls of the NFL as a veteran and be a mentor, be a leader in that locker room, and really just have more experience than these other guys. So whether it's Adoree Jackson, whether they go into free agency and they find someone new to bring in, the New York Giants do need to sign a veteran cornerback in the offseason. I would like it to be Adoree Jackson. Again, the Adoree Jackson in the slot experiment didn't work out. But Cordell Flott in the slot, that looks like it's working out. So everything kind of fell into place for the New York Giants in that regard. And now you have Adoree Jackson competing on the outside as the CB2, and I think he's doing an okay job. Nothing to write home about, nothing to blow you away. But again, if he comes back on an affordable one-year deal, just to be that veteran presence in the secondary, I'd be all for it. I would like to see Adoree Jackson return. However, like I said, going out into the free agency market, I'm not sure who's going to be available. I'd have to take a look. I'm sure that there's going to be some talents out there, probably on the higher price tag. If the Giants feel like really spending on their secondary and getting a veteran cornerback who's still younger than Adoree Jackson, however, and really good, I'm all for that as well. I think that if you look at their recent track history of signing cornerbacks in free agency, it's worked out for them. Janoris Jenkins gave them some really good seasons. DRC gave them some really good seasons. And Adoree Jackson gave them some really good seasons. So if they want to go try and do that once again, they should. They should go out there and try and find a really good cornerback to play alongside Deonte Banks next season with some veteran experience. But again, I like Adoree Jackson. He's a culture fit, knows the culture, knows the locker room. It would be great to have him back. I don't think that this is a player that I immediately am writing off and saying I don't want to return to the New York Giants. Definitely have an open mind here. I think that it would be a solid idea for the New York Giants to bring him back. One thing that I do want to comment on that you said about Deonte Banks, though, Alex, I'm surprised to hear that you're surprised by his tackling abilities. Tackling was maybe his biggest strength in college. This dude was a dog. I think Deonte Banks was an aggressive, mean corner. And I think a lot of that ties into his confidence. But 205 pounds for a corner at 6'1", that's a lot of size. He is a big dude. He is a really good cornerback in the tackling game and in run defense. When I was watching before the draft, of course, I've said it a million times on this channel, I'm really proud of the fact that I mocked him to the Giants and said that that's who I wanted, and now we have him. But when I was watching him at Maryland, the guy was just great in run defense, and he had so much IQ and so much confidence. So it's not shocking to me to see all that stuff translate into the NFL so quickly, just because it's the way he carries himself and it's the confidence that he plays with. And Alex, thinking back on some of the times where we've spoken to Brian Walker, defensive backs coach, trainer for Jabril Peppers and other New York Giants players, Darnay Holmes and other NFL players in general, what's the number one thing that he said to us that translates to success in the NFL for cornerbacks? Confidence. He said, if you're not playing with confidence, you're not going to be a good player. So that's coming from a real coach who coaches NFL players, was telling us specifically, confidence is the number one thing that you have to look for in your defensive backs. Deonte Banks, that's his number one trait. Confidence. He's not afraid to make any tackle, any hit, jump any pass, get out there again. Like I said, short-term memory loss. He messes up one play, he's on to the next. That's why I think he's been so successful, and why I'm really excited for his bright future here with the New York Giants. But Alex, I'll let you get a chance to kind of respond to some of the things that I said about Adoree Jackson and looking for a veteran cornerback in the offseason before we wrap up. Kind of what is your thought on that idea that, yeah, the Giants might need to add help to their secondary, might need to add a cornerback, but it shouldn't just be a third-round young rookie. They need to go out there and find a veteran cornerback, whether it's Adoree Jackson or somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's always good to have a veteran out there. And look, I think Shawn Murphy Bunting's a guy that is a free agent. There's a lot of free agents coming up. So the Giants will have their shoes of the crop. And ultimately, I think they're going to go for a guy that fits the scheme, good tackler, a guy that really can help in man coverage specifically, since that's the prominent, kind of scheme that we do run. But it also depends. What if Wink Martindale leaves? Like, that's also another consideration we have to incorporate into our mix. God willing, we keep him. I hope to God that the winning we've been experienced the last couple of weeks convinces him to stay. I think, and he said, like, I want to stay here. Like, this isn't a stepping stone for me. I want to be with the Giants. So it really ultimately comes down to Dable, and if that relationship is doing well. And by most accounts, it seems like they're fine. I haven't heard anything recently, and it kind of came out of nowhere to begin with. So we'll see how it goes. Winning cures all, and I think that the vibes are much better right now, and the defense is balling out, and Dable will be insane not to want to keep Wink. So I do believe that hopefully we will retain him, and the scheme will remain similar. And that's ultimately a good thing. Like, we want this scheme to remain the same, because changing the scheme, changing the defense, there is a portion of the season where we will have to adjust, and that is not ideal. We want this thing to remain as similar as possible, which is another reason why I think Kafka probably comes back, because they want to keep this system, the same. In terms of the guys will know the verbiage. It'll be the third year in the system for a lot of this, or second year at least, and then changing it again is not going to help anybody. So unless you're going to get an offensive coordinator that, like, you're legitimately like, this guy could be the next, like, Kellen Moore when he was in his prime with the Cowboys, So we'll see what happens, obviously, moving forward. But end of the day, like, getting a veteran CB2 is good for Banks. It's good for some of these younger guys like Trey Hawkins. It's also just good for, like, in case Banks were to get hurt, knock on wood again, you have someone with experience that could step into that role. So I do believe that a nice cornerback too with upside. We have $50 million to spend. $12-13 million for a CB2, like, sign me up. Honestly, I think we could probably bring Adarius Jackson back on a 1 or 2 year deal at that price. So maybe that's a consideration for the Giants, because obviously he knows the scheme, good tackler. Obviously he has a really good relationship in the locker room with a lot of these players, and he's a leader in that locker room for the DBs. So maybe you keep him. Maybe that's something that they do consider, or they go out for someone a little bit younger that can be a long-term solution and pair with Banks for the next 3 or 4 years. So that's also an opportunity. When the offseason comes around, we'll dive into all the cornerbacks available, who we like, obviously who we shouldn't go after, more expensive, more cost-efficient players. We have a lot of time to go through all of those options. But the Giants will have plenty. There's a really deep cornerback free agency market, whereas, like, the offensive line market's very thin. So, they'll have to spend in some places, and I think that they can get some good value in the free agent market for the cornerback position, and, maybe it does mean that Adarius Jackson comes back.
I totally agree with you there, and I think the point that you made that's most important is it depends on what happens with Wink Martindale. You can't say, I want to sign this corner, I want to sign that corner, until you know what defensive scheme you're running. That's really important for the New York Giants. I hope that Wink Martindale is back. I'm hoping and praying that he is back. I hope that whatever was going on with him and Brian Dable is totally smoothed over. How true was it? We don't really know. We probably never will know the full extent of what was going on behind the scenes. But I do hope that Brian Dable and Wink Martindale are able to keep this partnership, because maybe they don't see eye to eye on everything. Maybe they have their key differences and it causes them to butt heads. But winning cures all, like you said, Alex. And right now the New York Giants are winning. And Brian Dable has to recognize that Wink Martindale is a huge part of the reason why the New York Giants are winning. So I think bringing him back is a priority, making sure that he stays with the New York Giants. And again, can't really look at too many of those corners until you know what defensive scheme you're going to be running. Some of these guys in free agency, veteran guys, play great in zone. Others don't play so well in zone. Wink Martindale this season running a lot of zone. So you got to see who's good in press, who's not. We don't really know what the defensive scheme is going to look like. But once we do, of course, like Alex said, we will be giving you the full rundown on all of the cornerback free agent targets for the New York Giants right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we will catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.